Friday edition of NewsWire on SportsGrid. Super Wild Card Weekend is here, and I'm Craig Mish. Great to be with you as we'll preview all of the games coming up this weekend with Warren Sharp. We've got the Sharp Report coming up fast and furious. Also, Jim Ghazali joins us from Legal Sports Report with the very latest in sports betting. And Bill Bender joins us from Sporting News. We'll go over the championship, which Michigan ended up winning on Monday night, and also the future for Alabama football. That and a whole lot more here on our Friday edition of the show. We start off with where we began yesterday. The New England Patriots yesterday parted ways with Bill Belichick. Today, they named their new head coach. And Gerard Mayo, as expected, will take over. Great player once upon a time with the New England Patriots and coach, and now will run the show for Robert Kraft and company moving forward. Remains to be seen what his coaching staff will look like, whether or not Bill Belichick will coach somewhere else, who he will end up taking along with him, but Mayo is the guy going into 2024. Now, who's the guy going into 2031 with the Atlanta Braves? His name, Alex Anthopoulos, former executive of the year with the Braves, signs a contract extension, going to be with Atlanta probably until he decides to retire, or even furthermore. The Braves announced this morning, so congrats to Alex, who will be on our show as we get closer to spring training in February and March. Now, over in the National Football League, as we mentioned, several games to get to, a lot of injury issues and weather issues that definitely are on tap for the weekend. Jair Alexander for the Green Bay Packers, they can't afford to lose anyone going into the weekend, especially with the high-flying Cowboys, but he rolled an ankle in practice. We'll see. He was at half speed on Wednesday. Will he be able to play this weekend? Remains to be seen. Also, A.J. Brown did not practice due to a knee injury. This combined with Jalen Hurts' lack of practice have people wondering if Philadelphia is going to go to Tampa Bay and win. We'll see. Minkah Fitzpatrick will play Saturday's game against the Bills for the Pittsburgh Steelers, so good news on the defense there. Denzel Ward of the Browns is questionable for tomorrow afternoon game against the Houston Texans. Cedric Tillman, by the way, their third or fourth wide receiver for Joe Flacco, he was ruled out with a concussion. But as we mentioned, the game coming up this weekend with a lot of fanfare, probably the most watched game of the weekend on television and streaming, is going to be with two rabid fan bases, the Green Bay Packers, the Dallas Cowboys. We know the Packers fans, the Cheeseheads, are going to travel to Dallas. This line has moved back and forth. It actually has, in some sports books, gone down from 7.5 to 7. Does Warren Sharp have a position on the game this weekend? Here's some analysis. It's time for the Sharp Report.
This Joe Barry-led Green Bay Packers defense has looked substantially better the past couple of weeks. They got some players back healthy, as well as returned guys from team-imposed suspensions. That being said, take into consideration who they've been going up against, and I think they're going to be facing an entirely different beast this week when they travel to Dallas to take on Dak Prescott. The last 2 weeks we're talking about, they went up against Jaron Hall, who is not an NFL caliber quarterback, as well as they went up against Justin Fields, and they know how to play Justin Fields. Justin Fields has never won a game against him. He's never performed well. He doesn't have the receivers, and as soon as they covered up DJ Moore, Fields was tucking his head, tucking the football, and running with it, and they had a lot of answers for those quarterback sneaks. Justin Fields did very little offensively, but prior to that, let's talk about the three teams that they faced and these quarterbacks that they went up against. They played the number 32 offense of the New York Giants and gave up 24 points to Tommy DeVito, allowing him to go a ridiculous 17 of 21, his best game of the year at 81% completions. The very next week, week 15, they played the number 22 offense of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They gave up 34 points to Baker Mayfield, allowed him to throw for 4 touchdowns and 381 yards at 13.6 yards per attempt. And the very next week, they faced the number 30 ranked offense of the Carolina Panthers. They still allowed Bryce Young to lead his team to 30 points and over 300 passing yards, averaging 8.7 yards per attempt, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. This Dallas Cowboys team, definitely Jekyll and Hyde, home versus road. They're coming back home and they're playing what I believe is an overrated Packers defense dictated by Joe Barry, who's going to have his players out of position, allow for a lot of opportunities underneath with this Dallas Cowboys offense. I expect Dallas to have some success scoring points, but on the other side of things, don't discount Jordan Love. They've changed their offense dramatically. He's not throwing the ball and chucking it deep down the field at the second highest rate. They're throwing the ball more composed and more frequently and more consistently underneath. It's why he is throwing for so many touchdowns, moving his team offensively, putting up points. I think we're going to see a great duel. I think this 7.5 number might be a touch too high because I think the Packers are going to compete, even though I do anticipate Dallas having a lot of success offensively as well.
Coming up later, we'll talk about, Warren, about this line move over on FanDuel. I know BetMGM, it still remains 7.5. We'll see where it is in about 40 minutes from now. Okay, the future for Texas football looks like it belongs in the hands of Quinn Ewers. He announced he's returning to the Longhorns in the Southeastern Conference next season. What does that mean for Arch Manning? Will he transfer? Will he stay? Who knows? Marvin Harrison Jr., we know his future. He's headed to the NFL draft. He's going to be a first-round pick, probably a top 5 pick in the draft as well. Michigan's leading tackler, Junior Colson, he has declared for the NFL draft. And also Dan Lanning, who was potentially a candidate to become the next head coach at the University of Alabama, has announced that he is staying at Oregon. Now, in the NBA last night, the Portland Trail Blazers having a tough season. Maybe they're rethinking that Dame Lillard trade. They lost by 62 last night to the Oklahoma City Thunder, the 5th largest rout in NBA history, 139-77. Darko Rajakovic fined $25,000 for that tirade he went in on the refs earlier this week at the Los Angeles Lakers and all of the foul calls that were made there. The NBA draft has decided that they want to make the draft actually a 2-night event. And so as if the first night wasn't enough, they're going to make it 2. How they're going to accomplish this, I have no idea. No one even watches the first. Marcus Smart is going to be out at least 6 weeks due to a finger injury. It has not gone well in terms of health for Smart since he was traded. The New York Yankees have another starting pitcher in their rotation. It is not Blake Snell. They did not pony up for him. They did give $37 million to Marcus Stroman in a 2-year contract. So Stroman projects as the Yankees' number 2 or number 3 starter. Of course, Garrett Cole will start for them opening day. The largest arbitration contract ever given out is to Juan Soto in the final year of his deal, $31 million to play for the Yankees in 2024, setting the bar for what is going to be an insane free agency for him in 2025. Pete Alonso, by the way, also coming up on free agency as well. They've avoided arbitration with him. He agrees on a 1-year, $20.5 million contract. And with all these players that the Dodgers have added, they had to subtract some, especially after getting Ohtani, Yamamoto, Teoscar Hernandez. So they traded prospect Michael Busch in a 4-player trade with the Dodgers. Busch projects to play first base, third base, maybe some designated hitter for the Cubs going forward. And by the way, that could change if they end up signing Cody Bellinger. The hot stove still not quite percolating. This would be a good time to get it going, considering we're dwindling down with football games, but not happening yet for baseball. Okay, so the big news in college football we thought would have been Michigan winning the championship. It turns out to be Nick Saban's departure from the University of Alabama. Bill Bender is with us from Sporting News. We'll ask him about his trip to Houston for the championship and also who may end up coaching the Tide next. We'll be right back here on NewsWire.
You have sat down with Nick Saban for a lengthy interview. You have spoken to Nick Saban multiple times throughout his career. How surprised were you?
I mean, he's not going anywhere, I don't believe. And at the end of the day, very surprised. Athletic department surprised. Talked to a few people, Alabama folks, late last night, early this morning. Very surprised. Didn't see it coming.
The Early Line. Only on SportsGrid.
Quarterback at quarterback. We're going to lay some juice. We're going to have some dog prices, and we're going to go right in the middle.
Because I don't know what they're doing. To me, they're in a complete rebuild, Kev.
Go run, run, run. That's where overbackers on this 51.5 shot.
Right now, he's a little bit more over money, but it's hovering right around.
The winner of this game will be the division
favorite. I don't care if they win because all we care about is the money, baby, the money.
Pro Football Today. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid. The Bostonian versus the Book.
The Whites said we're getting the Stanley Cups, and now they got Stanley Cups in West Virginia.
Yep. They're doing $300 million gross a year in sales.
Listen, man, we don't need that much, man.
They're crushing
I'll take
it.
a little piece of the Stanley Cup. I would drink from the Stanley Cup every day. I'll have inscribed on there. We'll get our BVB inscribed.
Yeah.
Stanley Cups.
The Bostonian versus the book.
That tells you how good this league is. Jeff, your mind. Big 12. Who's the team to beat?
Well, it's always Kansas. I don't care who comes in the league. And I love Kelvin Sampson, what he's done at Houston. I don't care. So Marquette, to me, is the best backcourt in the country. Tyler Kolek's the best point guard. Cam Jones is an elite scorer who just plays with such a good pace, and he's so smart.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
What did you think when you saw Lawrence on 3rd and 4th down, those 2 plays?
When you have a meltdown like the Jaguars have, the clear favorite coming into the season, we all know that, and they choke like they did, and they have this fall like they did, people are going to question what's wrong with Trevor Lawrence. He had a regression. Not a major one, but he was not as good as last season. What's happened to the play calling?
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Yay, congratulations, but the game was over at that point, so another one of those terrible beats. If you had 3.5, 4, even 4.5, this was a 10-point game until the final closing seconds.
In-game live, prime time, only on SportsGrid.
SportsGrid, the only streaming sports betting network. Tips, info, and insights to up your IQ. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Generally speaking, the college football season ends on a Monday night, and that news cycle carries over for some time because, again, we have a college football champion crowned, and this worked for exactly 48 hours because Nick Saban decided out of nowhere that this was going to be his last year coaching the University of Alabama. Let's bring in Bill Bender. He joins us. He was at the national championship in Houston, and Bill, I figured maybe you'd get a break this week, right? Like this would be, time to just reflect, maybe talk about where Harbaugh could end up. But instead, we get this bombshell dropped that Nick Saban has had enough, and he did an interview finally the other day. And I watched it like you did, and he said he's not sick or anything like that. It's just he didn't feel like he could give what he used to. And Nick Saban is not the best at always telling exactly reasons why. I'm going to guess there's a lot more to it than that, Bill, having experienced his tenure coaching the Dolphins. It can't just be that. I think there's some other stuff, too.
Yeah, it was a really odd timing. I'm not shocked that Nick Saban retired. He's 72 years old. He's been coaching for a very long time. He's been at Alabama 17 seasons. There's really nothing to accomplish other than if you want to make the argument that he would want to chase a championship in the 12-team playoff. But the circumstances were strange to me because, as I was telling you before the break, I was around sources all during media day at the college football playoff championship game, and the general consensus was, oh, he's not going to retire. He's going to keep going. This guy's going to coach forever. And a couple days later, he retires. So it does set up an interesting job for the next guy, because as you know from doing this a long time, you don't want to be the guy that follows the guy, especially one that won 9 SEC championships and 6 national titles.
Yeah, I think, Bill, in the end, for Saban, he didn't admit this because naturally, I think he wants to go to TV, do broadcasting, maybe work for SEC Network or somewhere. And by the way, he'll be very good. I mean, he doesn't let loose in public, but on that sort of stuff, he does. But Bill, Nick Saban, credit to him, walks in a kid's house and gets them to come to the school, maybe has to pay through NIL. I think Saban's okay with that, Bill. It sounds like he is. What he's not okay with is that that's not where the story ends for these kids. And by the way, I got no issue with it. This is just the way it's going to be. There's free agency now in college sports and college athletics and college football. But Bill, the idea that Saban has to recruit his players not just to go to Alabama, but now to stay at Alabama like several times over, that's got to be exhausting. I don't know how he can do it.
Right. And I think he's not the only one. We could talk about Jim Harbaugh in a little bit and whether or not he's going to go to the NFL. And I think that's equal parts. He won a national championship at Michigan. He's gotten in some trouble with the NCAA. And the same things that Nick Saban is probably tired of. Saban was very critical of the use of how NIL was applied. Not that NIL was being used, but how we were doing it with collectives. And remember, he got in a little bit of trouble for the not trouble, but controversy with the Texas A&M comment. He doesn't like the transfer portal. He doesn't like the expansion of the college football playoff. He doesn't like a lot of things that, quite frankly, he dominated the BCS and playoff era. But I think in his defense, yeah, I might think about retiring too and be on TV, where I think he'll be brilliant if they bring him on game day.
Yeah. And again, 72 years old at that point, Bill, you can start to, even if you are wrong, think you are right because you've earned it at that point and step away, which I think he has probably for good. Now, Jim Harbaugh's role now is sort of to be determined. He is, the most coveted coach in the land right now. I understand, many people think Bill Belichick will be or Mike Vrabel. With all due respect to them, it's just not possible. I mean, Jim Harbaugh going back to, if he decides to do this, to the National Football League, is going to be the highest coach ever in history. Maybe this is just more about free agency and the opportunity there as opposed to the talent, because while he was very good in San Francisco, it still remains to be seen what would happen if he went to the Chargers or if he went to the Falcons or somewhere else. But he's at the top of the list for a lot of teams, I'm sure, Bill. The question will come in the next week or two because teams are not going to want to wait around. Do you think inevitably he does make the jump?
I think we'll know by early next week. Now, there are some conflicting reports that I read something yesterday where he kind of wants to stay and he would prefer to stay. J.J. McCarthy might stay, but some of that is hinging on what kind of penalties may result from the 2 investigations from the NCAA. He doesn't want to cripple the program with those investigations. If he goes to the NFL, like you said, I would anticipate it happens early next week. Michigan has a national championship parade on Saturday. I don't see him jumping to the Chargers before then.
Right.
And he's absolutely a coveted coach. He has a top 5 winning percentage. And that chance to be one of the coaches to win a national title and a Super Bowl, a list that includes Barry Switzer, Jimmy Johnson, and Pete Carroll, all coaches that Jim Harbaugh shares a lot of characteristics with, might be too much to pass up.
Very few coaches have succeeded in both spots. Pete Carroll one, Jimmy Johnson another, and then very few after that, including Nick Saban and many others, just have not succeeded at both levels. And Harbaugh has had success now at both levels as well. Okay, to win the national championship over on FanDuel, the little bit of a boost we saw yesterday was from Texas moving up a little bit from about 9 to 7.5 to 1 with the announcement that Quinn Ewers is coming back. But beyond that, they go to the SEC. Their schedule gets tougher. Michigan's going to lose some players. They've dropped to 12 to 1. LSU, interestingly enough, has moved into one of the favorites at 12 to 1 as well. We're far ahead from this, Bill. We got a long way to go. But any team that you think is more interesting than another going in?
Well, Ohio State's going to have an all-in year next year. They had several players stay. Marvin Harrison obviously left for the draft, but some key defensive players are back from a defense that was right there with Michigan this year in terms of scoring and stats and those kind of things, and fell just short in Ann Arbor. They picked up Quinshad Judkins. I know you've watched him, the Ole Miss running back. That's going to add a layer of physicality to the offense around Will Howard, the new quarterback. It just feels like there's so much pressure on the Buckeyes, on Ryan Day, to go win and win big, that I think they're in an all-in spot. You mentioned Texas. I like them too. I like that Quinn Ewers returned. I think that's a signal to me that Steve Sarkisian isn't going to entertain the Alabama job. And why would he? Why would you go to Alabama when you've already built what you've built at Texas and the resources they have? So, I mean, an Ohio State-Texas national championship game wouldn't surprise me at all. Of course, I would still pick Georgia over both teams right now.
That does make sense. Do you think Manning leaves Texas, Arch Manning?
I think he's going to stay. I'm going to go against the grain here, and I know that would be 2 years of sitting behind another quarterback, but consider where he played. He played at a small school. It was clear in their spring game that he might not be ready. I know the popular take is Arch Manning to Alabama or Arch Manning to Ohio State. I actually think he would benefit from one more year behind Quinn Ewers. Then he comes out, his 3rd season with the program, be ready to go, would generate a lot of hype. And remember, Eli Manning didn't play his first 2 seasons. He sat behind Romaro Miller. Peyton was on the bench before injury. So the Manning family likes having those guys prepared. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say Arch Manning stays no matter what. and this recent news doesn't impact his decision as much as people think.
Yeah, well, if he stays, it's great for Texas. If he leaves, we know we'll be talking about next Friday here on NewsWire. Thanks again, Bill, for coming on the show. Really appreciate it. Hopefully the cycle of news ends, but in college, I don't think so. Thanks again. See you soon.
Hey, I've operated on that Bill Belichick mantra, no days off, I suppose. Maybe next week we'll get one, but that's why I enjoy the job.
Yeah, we're on to Tuscaloosa, as they say, Cincinnati, etc. All right, that's Bill Bender from Sporting News. Coming up next, it's time for us to check back with our friend Jim Gazzali from Legal Sports Report. Sports betting is going live in Vermont. What does that look like? And also, who are the operators in the state of Virginia that are having success in terms of bringing in revenue for sports wagering? We'll touch on that. And then, of course, Warren Sharp joins us. We've got the Sharp Report as well. This is NewsWire on SportsGrid every day, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern. And those of you who are ready to play the daily fantasy slate in fantasy football for the weekend and the playoffs, don't despair. I've got you tomorrow morning along with Davis Maddock, Joe Pisapia, Matt Stryker have you Sunday morning as well. Be right back.
Sat down with Nick Saban for a lengthy interview. You have spoken to Nick Saban multiple times throughout his career. How surprised were you?
I mean, he's not going anywhere, I don't believe. And at the end of the day, very surprised. Athletic department surprised. Talked to a few people, Alabama folks, late last night, early this morning. Very surprised. Didn't see it coming.
The Early Line. Only on SportsGrid.
Quarterback at quarterback. We're going to lay some juice. We're going to have some dog prices, and we're going to go right in the middle.
Because I don't know what they're doing. To me, they're in a complete rebuild, Kev.
Go run, run, run. That's where overbackers on this 51.5 shot.
So right now, we saw a little bit more over money, but it's hovering right around.
The winner of this game will be the division
I
favorite.
don't care if they win because all we care about is the money, baby, the money.
Pro Football Today. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid. The Bostonian versus the Book.
The wife said we're getting the Stanley Cups, and now they got Stanley Cups in West Virginia.
Yep. They're doing $300 million gross a year in sales.
Listen, man, we don't need that much, man.
They're crushing
I'll take
it.
a little piece of the Stanley Cup. I would drink from the Stanley Cup every day. I'll have inscribed on there. We'll get our BVB inscribed.
Yeah.
Stanley Cups.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
That tells you how good this league is. Jeff, your mind. Big 12. Who's the team to beat?
Well, it's always Kansas. I don't care who comes in the league. And I love Kelvin Sampson, what he's done at Houston. I don't care. So Marquette, to me, is the best backcourt in the country. Tyler Kolek's the best point guard. Cam Jones is an elite scorer who just plays with such a good pace, and he's so smart.
Betting above the rim. Only on SportsGrid.
What did you think when you saw Lawrence on 3rd and 4th down, those two plays?
When you have a meltdown like the Jaguars have, the clear favorite coming into the season, we all know that, and they choke like they did, and they have this fall like they did, people are going to question what's wrong with Trevor Lawrence. He had a regression. It's not a major one, but he was not as good as last season. What's happened to the play calling?
Pharrell Coast to Coast. Only on SportsGrid.
Yay, congratulations. But the game was over at that point. So another one of those terrible beats. If you had 3.5, 4, even 4.5, this was a 10-point game until the final closing seconds.
In-game live, prime time. Only on SportsGrid.
SportsGrid, the only streaming sports betting network. Tips, info, and insights to up your IQ. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Welcome back to NewsWire. We close out with our guest from Legal Sports Report today. Jim Ghazali is back with us talking about Virginia and the successes that a couple of sports operators have had in terms of wagering. Let's bring Jim in to get into the latest. Hey, Jim, happy Friday to you, and thanks for appearing on the show again this week. How are you?
Hey, Craig. Doing well. Thanks for having me.
All right, let's get started here. Sports betting goes live in Vermont. This was highly anticipated, albeit one of the smaller states as far as revenue is concerned. How does it look? Who went live this morning?
Yes, so far so good out of the Green Mountain State. You know, from the handful of people that I've been speaking with over the last 24 hours or so. So they launched at midnight Wednesday into Thursday. So Thursday morning, 3 sports books went live in Vermont. You've got FanDuel, DraftKings, and Fanatics. Those 3 operators were selected in a public bidding process. Now, there were 2 other applicants, BetMGM and ESPN Bet. However, those 2 were not selected by state regulators. Now, what I found quite interesting, Craig, was that there was a point scale, if you will, in the application process. And it was 1,000 total points available across a variety of different areas: the sportsbook's experience, their ethics, the tech platform, and what sorts of responsible gambling measures that they had in place. So evidently the FanDuel, DraftKings, and Fanatics were superior to the others, BetMGM and ESPN Bet, like I said, not being selected there. Some first bets, which, you know, are always interesting. FanDuel, they had a $10 parlay, Texans money line with Chiefs -4.5 for this weekend. Fanatics, their first bet in Vermont was a $10 prop bet on Max Struss over 2.5 3-pointers last night, which did not hit. He was 0 for 2 from 3 last night in that Cavs-Nets game. Exchanging a couple emails yesterday with Vermont regulators, they told me that no issues so far. Everything was up and running smooth, everything going well, and the state does expect to bring in $7 million in tax revenue from sports betting. So, like you said off the top there, Craig, certainly one of the smaller states to legalize sports betting, but another addition to the entire U.S. sports betting landscape for sure.
Yeah, and we'll keep an eye on it to see, you know, what the progress is there, because naturally any state that has legalized sports betting's very important for us to follow. Now, ESPN Bet is another story that we've been following all year long as far as their progress is concerned. How does it look like for them in terms of the money raised, or made, I should say, in Maryland?
Yeah, so this was the first full month, December, in Maryland that we have complete ESPN Bet figures. Because if you recall, when they launched halfway through November, their parent company, Penn Entertainment, was still accepting bets as the Barstool Sportsbook for the first half of November before that rebranded app relaunched as ESPN Bet halfway through the month. So ESPN Bet took in $42.4 million in wagers in Maryland for December. It was about 8% of online handle there, which is a few percentage points up from November, which is a positive trend. They offered that $5.8 million in promos. So the promos did drop off a little bit, as one might expect after their launch month in November. And that promo spend made up about 14% of their handle. Now, the total online handle in Maryland for December was 541.7-ish million. FanDuel had the most, 245 million in online bets for FanDuel, making up 45% of that market share. DraftKings was next with 167.1 million, 31% of market share for DraftKings. Parlays, like we've been talking about a lot, Craig. Parlays continue to be the bet of choice in most markets across the U.S., especially here in Maryland in December. Parlays were 45% of all betting, and the sportsbooks held 19%. So a 19% win rate for the sportsbooks on those parlays, the combination bets that bettors like to partake in. Like we've also talked about, Craig, not super successful for the bettors, and really a way to pad the bottom line for the sports books. And we've seen plenty of sports books in recent months really tout those parlay products, whether it be through the NFL, the NBA, NHL, all of the top brands in the U.S. sports betting landscape, improving those parlay products, and it's certainly paying dividends for them, especially here in Maryland in December. Pro football and basketball in Maryland, pretty tight in terms of overall betting for the two. The bettors fared a little bit better against the house with football. The sports books held on to 2% there for football and about 6% for basketball. One other interesting note out of Maryland, hockey, not all that popular, just about 1% of online handle there, which I thought was a little bit surprising. You have the Washington Capitals relatively close there, which is a fairly large market team. So seeing only one, barely 2% of online handle for hockey in December just stuck out to me as a little bit interesting.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, right now with hockey in season, you would think the number would be a little bit higher, but naturally, maybe not the most popular sport to bet on. Let's go over now to Virginia, over $630 million in revenue from November, so that's a very big number for them. Jim, which sports books led the way in November?
Yeah, so for Virginia in November, like you said, $632.2 million in online handle, their highest handle month ever in Virginia. Now, what's interesting about Virginia is they don't share the per operator breakdown every month. I had to submit a Freedom of Information request to get these monthly breakdowns, and we did see FanDuel, as one might expect, top that market with 41% of online handle, $261.8 million there in November. DraftKings was next with 28% at $178.7 million. BetMGM, $67.9 million there to take that third spot in Virginia in November, which was quite significantly more, almost triple what the combination of Barstool and ESPN Bet did in November. Like I mentioned a few moments ago, they did have that split month where ESPN Bet relaunched as that rebranded app for Penn halfway through the month. $26.9 million in Virginia in November for that combo of Barstool and ESPN, which, if we look at the landscape of where they launched in November, that is one of their lowest handle markets that we saw, and only 4% of online handle there. What we saw in a variety of other markets, Maryland, like we just talked about, Pennsylvania, Indiana was another one where they were grabbing about 7-8% of online handle during those first 2 weeks there. So Virginia was a little bit lagged a little bit behind there for ESPN Bet, like we saw. Now, like we've talked about too, Craig, over the last couple of weeks and last couple of months, is about these promo dollars. Virginia doesn't disclose that information, but it'll be interesting to see as we continue to go through the NFL playoffs. The NBA season starts to ramp up. College basketball season starts to ramp up with conference play like we're in now. And then, of course, March Madness here in the next couple of months. It'll be interesting to see how ESPN Bet continues that promotional spending. Just hopping back to Maryland real quick, we did see that promo spend kind of drop off. So It'll be interesting to see what happens in these other markets where we get that data as we go through here, which is, still another busy point in the sports betting calendar. And then you get into that other major customer acquisition point when we hit March Madness. So we'll see how that promo spend and that market share of handle kind of plays out here over the next couple of weeks and couple of months for ESPN Bet as they, try to gain customers, maintain customers, and, really solidify themselves in these various markets.
Yeah, I mean, I cannot imagine that they're happy with a 4% share of the online handle. But again, this is relatively new for their launch. But a year from now, Jim, if we're still having that same conversation, we know how this is going for them. All right, appreciate you coming on, Jim. Great to see you and catch up once again here on NewsWire. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you again next week.
Thanks, Craig. You too.
All right, Jim Gazzali from Legal Sports with us. Coming up next, we review every game in Super Wildcard Weekend with Warren Sharp. The Sharp Report's up next, so stay with us here on NewsWire. We'll be right back.
You have sat down with Nick Saban for a lengthy interview. You have spoken to Nick Saban multiple times throughout his career. How surprised were you?
I mean, he's not going anywhere, I don't believe. And at the end of the day, very surprised. Athletic department surprised. Talked to a few people, Alabama folks, late last night, early this morning. Very surprised. Didn't see it coming.
The Early Line. Only on SportsGrid.
Quarterback at quarterback. We're going to lay some juice. We're going to have some dog prices, and we're going to go right in the middle.
Because I don't know what they're doing. To me, they're in a complete rebuild, Kev.
Go run, run, run. That's where overbackers on this 51.5 shot.
Right now, he's a little bit more over money, but it's hovering right around.
The winner of this game will be the division
I
favorite.
don't care if they win because all we care about is the money, baby, the money.
Pro Football Today. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid. The Bostonian versus the Book.
The wife said we're getting the Stanley Cups, and now they got Stanley Cups in West Virginia.
Yep. They're doing $300 million gross a year in sales.
Listen, man, we don't need that much, man.
They're crushing
I'll take
it.
a little piece of the Stanley Cup. I would drink from the Stanley Cup every day. I'll have inscribed on there. We'll get our BVB inscribed.
Yeah.
Stanley Cups.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
That tells you how good this league is. Jeff, you're mine. Big 12. Who's the team to beat?
Well, it's always Kansas. I don't care who comes in the league. And I love Kelvin Sampson, what he's done at Houston. I don't care. So Marquette, to me, is the best backcourt in the country. Tyler Kolek's the best point guard. Cam Jones is an elite scorer who just plays with such a good pace, and he's so smart.
Betting above the rim. Only on SportsGrid.
What did you think when you saw Lawrence on 3rd and 4th down, those two plays?
When you have a meltdown like the Jaguars had, the clear favorite coming into the season, we all know that, and they choke like they did, and they have this fall like they did, people are going to question what's wrong with Trevor Lawrence. He had a regression. Not a major one, but he was not as good as last season. What's happened to the play calling?
Pharrell Coast to Coast. Only on SportsGrid.
Yay, congratulations, but the game was over at that point, so another one of those terrible beats. If you had 3.5, 4, even 4.5, this was a 10-point game until the final closing seconds.
In-game live, prime time. Only on SportsGrid.
SportsGrid, the only streaming sports betting network. Tips, info, and insights to up your IQ. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Welcome back to NewsWire. Adam Peters is the new general manager of the Washington Commanders. Harris family, of course, bought the Commanders about a year ago, and Peters will take over, won Super Bowls, helping run the New England Patriots for many years. So with a GM in place, you would assume a coach would be next. It's time for us now to go to the National Football League. It is Super Wildcard Weekend. Of course, Warren Sharp's in the house for the previews. It's time now for the Sharp Report. No, Warren is here with us, and boy, you know, we would love to go into the weekend talking about the teams and the matchups, but Warren, as we talked about on Monday, so much of these games could hinge on whether, at least a third of them, it would appear, is the case. Thanks for coming on the show, and it's time for us to dive into that. I didn't think that that would be as significant, but, I mean, even seeing some reports as how miserable the games could be, I doubt they'll be moved. But, boy, the playing conditions for these games look really bad in Buffalo and Kansas City.
Yeah, and I'm trying to take a positive spin. I'm a little bit biased here because I do have position on the under at a really good number for the Bills game. So naturally, moving it would be a catastrophic decision for the NFL because I don't think there's people want to watch these games. The positive spin is that I think these types of games being televised once in a while are the games that you look back on of the lore of the NFL and say, oh my God, do you remember this game? Do you remember that game? And the NFL needs games like this. I do think that they would be a lot of fun. You know, the game that's being played in Kansas City is going to be like playing on Hoth, you know, or some desolate planet that does not get seen by the sun. The game time temperatures there are going to be ridiculous. We're talking wind chills, extremely cold. I mean, could that be unsafe for people to be watching that game? I don't know. You know, I'm not just a renowned expert in what frostbite temperatures occur once skin is exposed in these types of conditions, but I do know it's going to be cold as hell there, and it's going to be interesting to watch from the warmth of my lovely home here to try to, with a fire going in the background and just enjoying that game. Then the game in Buffalo, that's the big game that the total has moved more precipitously downwards because the winds there are a lot higher. Now, I am seeing my latest update from my modeling looks at the wind in Kansas City, 17 miles per hour with gusts of 27. That is something that you should be considering from a totals perspective as well. But in Buffalo, we're talking about winds still current as of right now, time of recording, and we're live here on SportsGrid. 25 mile per hour sustained winds with gusts of 46. Now, the gusts are a little bit lower than what they were projected to be on like Monday. We're talking from 54 to 46, and that still is going to make it more windy than the game was in the wind tunnel game when they played the New England Patriots and Mac Jones completed only 2 passes. So I'm interested to see this game. There will be a little bit of snow. That's going to be the factor that kind of changes things up a little bit, because when I was first handicapping this one, I didn't think that there was going to be snow. Now there is actually going to be, it looks like pretty likely that there is going to be snow of some sort. So difficult day for these passing attacks in that one, but there are props to take advantage of, and we've already taken advantage of some of them, looking at unders on some of the quarterback passing yards or passing attempts, looking at some of the overs on some of the running back rushing attempts, as well as Josh Allen's rushing attempt. There's a lot here that you can think about after the total is moved down, the weather looks bad, figure out other ways to attack the game and start with the prop markets.
Yeah, I think that that's the fascinating part about the weekend. And so let me sort of thinking this through here a little bit, Warren. I would feel more comfortable, and let's actually go out of order. Let's talk about Dolphins Bills first here. I'm sorry, Dolphins Chiefs first, because that game is tomorrow night. And so whatever weather forecast we have now for that game, I think is a little bit more realistic for whatever we would have for Sunday, just simply because Sunday's further out than Saturday. And in that game, I know what the weather is looking at. I mean, it looks like, you know, -20 wind chill or whatever the case is. Chiefs opened up at 3 when we were talking about this on MGM on Monday. Now it's up to 4.5. So if you're wanting to bet that total, 43.5 is what I see here at MGM. Are you advocating an under in that one as well as the Steelers-Bills game, or is it just because of the position that you had early in the week, Steelers-Bills, is it still playable at 35.5? So to repeat, I'm confusing people. 43.5 Dolphins-Chiefs total, 35.5 Steelers-Bills. Let's do both.
Yeah, so the Chiefs game, This one, I have not bet the under yet in this one. The wind does look like it might be more of a factor, so it might be something that I'll be inclined to look at here starting this afternoon, especially to your point, astutely mentioning that game is tomorrow night rather than Sunday, so a little bit further out. When you get winds above 15 plus miles per hour, it does affect the game. Now, in Buffalo, like I'm seeing this total get hit now again as we speak. It was funny. There was a big head fake, Craig. I can now officially say it was a head fake because I'm looking at the live line on my screens and it's now dropping down to 34.5. And I actually see some 34s out in some of the sports books out in Las Vegas. And we saw that game just a little bit ago. I saw that game get bet up to 36 and 36.5. And I was actually about to bang in the under at 36.5 before I joined this show. And now I'm looking at it and it's dropped again. I think that was just a false move to get it up there, maybe to buy to the 37 from 36.5, and then drop back down towards the under. If there are wind speeds, as we're discussing right now, and we've got two defensive-minded head coaches with teams that are both got rid of their offensive coordinators. Keep this in mind. Like there's a lot of parallels between both of these teams. Head coach defensive minded. Both teams got rid of their offensive coordinators mid-season. Both teams have been focusing a little bit more on the run game. The Steelers have Mason Rudolph, who really has been doing okay from a passing perspective on a few big plays through the air, but mostly it's been a sustained rushing attack. They went up against the they went up against the Ravens defense last week that can be had on the ground, which was playing their backups. Now they're going up against a much more difficult run defense in the Buffalo Bills. I think it's going to be a situation where both teams are going to try to run the football, play a little bit of field position. We're going to have a touchdown or two squirt through, in my opinion. I mean, it's sometimes harder to tackle guys in this cold weather, which is something we need to consider when we look at that total for the Chiefs and the Dolphins. You've got a lot of speed on that field. It may not be producing a lot of explosive plays regularly. However, it becomes difficult to catch the football because your fingers are freezing cold, but also wrap up and tackle in temperatures like this. And so it would not surprise me if there are a couple of bigger broken plays based upon some broken tackles by these ball carriers in both of these games potentially. But I would still not be looking to bet the over on the Bills-Steelers game, even at 35. I saw that wave come in. I was like, oh, somebody's got some gall to do that. That's, good for them. But certainly that was just a move to try to get a better number and unload further on the under.
Gotcha. My fear with these weather games, watching football as long as I have, Warren, is that we, sort of scream fire in the crowded theater for these games. And I would say the majority of the times is never as bad as it ends up being. It's like every broadcast, right? They open up. Oh, we thought it was going to be this, but it isn't as bad. It's like every year.
Right.
But there are obviously a couple every year out of nowhere shock us with how bad it is. Maybe one of those games factors in, but as long as you and I have been watching this, Warren, you know how it goes, man. It's like, oh, it's a sunny day. It's not as bad. And it's like we made all of this crap all week long. It doesn't end up.
You have to be ready to pivot, Craig. These early moves on Sunday night have been wrong most of the time. They've been overblown. The long range forecasts are not quite as good this year for whatever reason. More guys are getting involved betting games based on weather on Sunday night, Monday morning, and then it comes to like Wednesday and Thursday. It's like, hey, this doesn't look that bad, and then the game moves the opposite direction on like a Wednesday, Thursday. But bear in mind, like for these two games, we did not see that. The forecasts that we're seeing from Sunday night are still here, and it's Thursday afternoon almost right now. We'll see what happens between now and Sunday, but absolutely, when you're betting games, you always need to be fluid. You always need to be paying attention to things like weather. That's why guys who just play DFS, Craig, they have it so easy. The salaries are locked. They can just make their moves late if they want to. But when you're actually betting real money on these games, you have to be constantly monitoring the markets and the weather, and it becomes much more of a time-consuming event, but it's a lot of fun at the same time if you're right.
Yeah, no, love doing it. That's why we do it here. Okay, let's tackle the next few games here easier. So the Browns play the Texans in Houston. I'm seeing that the money is all on Cleveland, but this line's gone the other way. Houston's down to +2 on MGM. The total is 44.5. In this game, I really don't have a strong feeling here. I was feeling Cleveland all week long, but I don't want to be on the most tickets bet side of any game in the NFL. I want to be on the other side of that. Any position on this one?
Yeah, I was feeling Cleveland as well, but I believe that, some guys looked at the line that was there a few weeks ago when CJ Stroud wasn't the quarterback and the line was the Cleveland Browns -3, and now you insert CJ Stroud in there, how could the line still be -3? So smartly, probably from just a line shopping and just numbers perspective, they grabbed those threes, and that's why we see the number now sitting at 2 points. I still think that the way that this game is going to go is going to be on Joe Flacco's arm. And it's going to come down to, is he having success down the field or is he turning the football over? Because we know that when you do lose that turnover battle, you're going to lose 77% of your games. And no team since Joe Flacco has taken over the reins in Cleveland has turned the ball over more than the Cleveland Browns have in those games. And they actually have more games this entire season with multiple turnovers than any other team in the NFL. So you're really going to have to figure out this balance between, we do want to pass it more with Joe Flacco because he can actually get the ball down the field accurately. However, he's a little bit of a gunslinger as well and is turning the ball over in terms of a double agent. How much is that going to impact us? But the problem that the Browns are going to be running into is that this Texans defense is very good against the run. It's much weaker against the pass. So you want to throw the ball down the field against these guys. And, you know, one of the props that I like this weekend is Joe Flacco's passing yardage over. And I think there's a coupling that you can do with some David Njoku receiving props. If you look at the stats, pretty shocking to me, but Njoku has gone over his receptions in 14 of his last 15 games this season. Wow. Week 1, he went under. Since that point in time, he's gone over 14 of the last 15 games. Now, not always has the line been set at 5.5, but he has had 6+ receptions in 7 of his last 8 games. Joe Flacco likes to target him frequently. They have a high target rate of tight ends, third highest tight end target rate in the NFL since Flacco took over the reins. In addition, 2 high shell defenses by the Houston Texans at a pretty high rate, and tight end targets are more prevalent from Joe Flacco against these types of defenses. So I think Njoku could be in store for a game where he's targeted pretty frequently, especially I think D'Amico Ryans is going to go after Amari Cooper a little bit, not let him get those 270+ receiving yards like he did last game out, and that's going to free up some things for David Njoku.
100% healthy. You broke down Packers Cowboys earlier in the show, mentioning some value on Green Bay. That line is shifted to 7. Let's end with Rams Lions. We have a minute to go. Warren, maybe I'm the crazy one thinking that the Lions are going to win this game and do a good job. I don't know why. I think they're much better than the Rams. I know the Rams are playing awesome. I know that, but I'm not shying away from this one. I think Detroit's the better team.
You are absolutely right in the fact that very few people are thinking along those same lines. Most people I'm seeing, everybody's picking the Rams. It's just such a landslide of all this Rams money, all these people thinking that the Rams are going to win. I wouldn't be shocked if the books need the Detroit Lions here badly. The key question is, how much does Sean McVay's familiarity with Jared Goff affect the outcome of this game? I think it'll matter on a few plays, but not necessarily the entire game.
All right, Warren. We'll see you Monday.
Sat down with Nick Saban for a lengthy interview. You have spoken to Nick Saban multiple times throughout his career. How surprised were you?
I mean, he's not going anywhere, I don't believe. And at the end of the day, very surprised. Athletic department surprised. Talked to a few people, Alabama folks, late last night, early this morning. Very surprised. Didn't see it coming.
The Early Line. Only on SportsGrid.
Quarterback at quarterback. We're going to lay some juice. We're going to have some dog prices, and we're going to go right in the middle.
Because I don't know what they're doing. To me, they're in a complete rebuild, Kev.
Go run, run, run. That's where overbackers on this 51.5 shot.
So right now, we saw a little bit more over money, but it's hovering right around.
The winner of this game will be the division
favorite. I don't care if they win, because all we care about is the money, baby, the money.
Pro Football Today. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid. The Bostonian versus the Book.
The wife said we're getting the Stanley Cups, and now they got Stanley Cups in West Virginia.
Yep. They're doing $300 million gross a year in sales.
Listen, man, we don't need that much, man.
They're crushing
I'll take
it.
a little piece of the Stanley Cup. I would drink from the Stanley Cup every day. I'll have inscribed on there. We'll get our BVB inscribed
Yeah.
Stanley Cups.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
That tells you how good this league is. Jeff, you're mine. Big 12. Who's the team to beat?
Well, it's always Kansas. I don't care who comes in the league. And I love Kelvin Sampson, what he's done at Houston. I don't care. So Marquette, to me, is the best backcourt in the country. Tyler Kolek's the best point guard. Cam Jones is an elite scorer who just plays with such a good pace, and he's so smart.
Betting above the rim. Only on SportsGrid.
What did you think when you saw Lawrence on 3rd and 4th down, those two plays?
When you have a meltdown like the Jaguars had, the clear favorite coming into the season, we all know that, and they choke like they did, and they have this fall like they did, people are going to question what's wrong with Trevor Lawrence. He had a regression, not a major one, but he was not as good as last season. What's happened to the play calling?
Pharrell Coast to Coast. Only on SportsGrid.
Yay, congratulations, but the game was over at that point, so another one of those terrible beats. If you had 3.5, 4, even 4.5, this was a 10-point game until the final closing seconds.
In-game live, prime time. Only on SportsGrid.
SportsGrid, the only streaming sports betting network. Tips, info, and insights to up your IQ. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Welcome back to NewsWire here on SportsGrid. A couple of cold weather games, as Warren talked about earlier in the show. Below 0 temperatures in Kansas City, maybe close to that in Buffalo as well. So I thought I would tell a little story. So I think I've told it before on one of my other shows here, but several years ago, I actually went to one of the coldest games ever played, in the National Football League. It was between Tampa Bay and guess where? Green Bay. It was the divisional round matchup. It was after the wild card. The Buccaneers had beaten the Lions. Green Bay had gotten a first-round bye. And I'll never forget showing up to Lambeau Field and looking at their scoreboard. And there was no video. There was no stats. There was nothing. It was just a big, I think it was 4. It was 4 degrees at the time. So all it showed was like a 4 with a little degree, and that was it. And you talk about intimidating coming in as the opponent. I wonder if these teams will do something similar going into the game, especially in Buffalo, where it's so difficult to play in that weather. So true story. At a different time, used to travel all around the country, going to all these National Football League games and college football games. Now I get to sit here with you in the comforts of my Studio C doing NewsWire with you every day. Speaking of which, that'll do it for our week of shows. Thanks again to Warren Sharp for coming on, Jim Gazzali, as well as Bill Bender. Also, thanks to our associate producer, Michael Cohen, and our producer, Sam Yarnell, all week long, doing a great job for us, making sure we get on the air. As a reminder, I'll see you tomorrow morning, very early, 6 a.m. Eastern, for Fantasy Sports Today. Those of you who are playing daily fantasy, Davis and I will have you covered for that. And then Joe Pisapia and Matt Stryker will have you Sunday. So the next time I may see you would be Monday morning for our next edition of NewsWire. I know it is the Martin Luther King Jr. holiday, so some of you may be out of work and doing things with your family. Certainly, if that's the case, I'll see you back here on Tuesday. But enjoy your weekend. Enjoy Super Wildcard Weekend. We got wonderful programming covering you from every angle of sports betting right here on SportsGrid all weekend long. Until then, so long. And I will see you back here tomorrow morning for FST or Monday for our next edition of NewsWire.